Hello, my name is Konstantin Gervis. I am a musician, record producer, sound engineer, and a live performer. I've been using my DynaSonics since 2021, I would guess, something like that, and couldn't be happier. I have a long history of using mixers. I've been working with mixers since the mid-90s. I've used all sorts of different mixers, like old-time favorite of everyone, like SSLs, Neves. I've worked with high-end Soundcrafts, Amex, Midases, in various different circumstances. I worked as a sound engineer. I've recorded stuff. I made live gigs on them. So I'm very familiar with the nature of a mixer, of how different mixers differ from each other. But there was always a contrast between what I worked on in a professional capacity and what I used for my own music making, which is also a professional capacity, but on a much lower budget. So basically, a small format mixer was what I essentially needed for my music making, for live shows and so on. And unfortunately, all those small mixers, they never really sounded that great. When you go and work on a big format mixer and then you do sound on those, and you go to your own music production and you have to downsize and basically downgrade to a smaller mixer, it's kind of disappointing, shall I say. So that's why I was searching for different mixers over the years. I even got myself like a really old Mackie CR 1604, the original techno mixer what people used on those early second wave techno recordings. It had absolutely zero headroom, a sound would be squashed. That kind of created natural compression in a way. And that had a certain sound to it, which is kind of what those early techno records sounded like. What was fun, but again, I'm coming from those high headroom, big analog mixers to those little, forget about headroom mixers. It was always a problem. At one point, I saw on online photos of DynaSonic mixers. I was like, oh wow, that's unusual. That's kind of more, it has more of everything. And finally we got a mixer that you can actually buy in Europe that didn't cost insane amount of money. I was kind of happy to get my hands on an APB because I was super curious how did it sound. So I've got one and I was literally blown away by the sound quality. That's why I chose DynaSonics, because it sounded amazing. Considering it was well balanced in a way that it had a insane headroom. The preamps sounded nice. The summing was really beautiful. It is kind of a clean mixer, so it's not like a character sound, like many mixers with transformers would be. But it didn't degrade the sound at all. Anything I run through my old Mackie, it would definitely degrade the sound. So what comes in would not come out the same. Also, the equalizers were always in the signal path, and here equalizer can be switched in and out. So you can have it as clean as you want, or you can add an equalizer only when you need it and not have it always in the signal path. Even if it's at zero, it would still affect the sound. the feature set. It's basically what you see is first thing that surprises you. The channel count in a 19-inch rack format of a mixer is exceptional. It has basically 16 channels, but the 4 of those 16 are stereo channels. So it's actually 20, not 16. It has 6 auxiliary sends on individual sends, which is unusual. There are some mixers that have the same amount of auxiliaries, but this is not really a standard. Mostly it's like 4, switchable sometimes. On some of the markets you can switch 3 and 4 into being 5 and 6, but you cannot use them all at the same time. Then things you don't see, the headroom. Headroom, I was actually very surprised. The number of groups surprised me, because mostly what you get on the small mixers, like 19-inch rack mixers, 4 groups. And here you do have 4 groups seemingly. However, you have this what is labeled as M and C, which is mono and center. And this has its roots in a live sound, when you would have a mono channel which you would use for subwoofers, for example, and center channel which you would use for a center speaker. But those are just 2 extra groups. So basically, this is a 6-group mixer in a way. Even though the mono center groups are much more limited than the groups 1 to 4, they're still very, very useful. Now, another very, very cool feature is the direct outs. The direct outs on this mixer are configurable, so they can be like after preamp, after EQ, before the fader, or after fader. It is internally configurable, which is not so easy to do. However, it is still configurable, so you can really tailor the mixer for how you want to work with. I wish it would be on a button, but it is what it is. You know, at least there is such an option, which is super important, because for example, if I would record a live band, like a normal drums, guitars and stuff like that, like electric and acoustic instruments, I would rather have my direct outs immediately after the preamp, so I can mix it later properly. Now, if I'm doing electronic mix, even if I'm multi-tracking, I would rather have the direct outs after the fader, so the recording would reflect my movements on the mixer. So anything I'm doing on the mixer is actually reflected in the recording. So if I lower a fader, if I open an auxiliary send, and if I balance things, they being recorded this way. So all I need to do is just put all the faders on 0 at the computer recording software, press play, and it would play exactly like I played it during the recording. So it's very, very important to have this option. Also, the stereo return channels. To have 4 stereo channels with most of the a separate gain for left and right, and 3-band equalizer on each stereo channel, switchable EQ, same amount of auxiliaries. That is in my book a win. So the only downside is the direct outs are actually a mono sound of each channel, so you cannot really record stereo direct outs from the stereo channels. However, you can send them to the groups, so you can still record them stereo, you just cannot really use. So the mono sounds are kind of useless for me personally. I understand why it's the case, because if you look at the back of the mixers, basically there is no space for anything else. They're just fully occupied. There is no real estate left. So I accept this limitation, it's okay, especially because I can actually use the groups and for recording stereo channels. So I would record, let's say, first well of the mono channels from the direct outs and the stereo channels from the groups, somehow submixed. I don't use a lot of microphones in this studio, but I have a real band where I play guitar. I will use this mixer for recording and mixing this band. I did not use this mixer yet in such a setting. No, but that is not. Oh, even if I look at the photos, I would probably just look at the channel count, auxiliary count, how many equalizers has how many bands. But there are little things about this mixer that makes it even better. For example, the line mic switch. It means that I can actually keep the mic and the lines both connected. So I can plug a microphone and I can plug a line input, whether it's a Eurorack or a drum machine, or in a traditional situation would be like tape returns or outputs from the audio interface. You can press a button and you switch between one input to another input, which is only reserved for higher end mixers. Usually you don't have it on any of the budget mixers at all. You have to physically unplug and plug and unplug. Here is amazing. It really reminds me of the old days of working in an analog studio on a 2-inch tape machine, right? I just would flip a button and the mixer would accept the tape returns. Another cool thing that you don't really think, especially electronic musicians don't really think about it, but each channel has an individual phantom power button. So you don't really need to think about what microphones you plug into which channels, because most of the time you don't want to send the phantom power down to dynamic microphones because they can essentially electrocute you if the mixer is not grounded properly. And it can actually kill ribbon microphones, the phantom power. You switch on phantom power with the ribbon mic connected, your ribbon microphone is dead instantly. Not all of them, some of them are actives, but like a traditional ribbon microphone would die, basically. So it's a really, really cool feature when you just have a condenser mic connected, you switch in the phantom power that's dedicated to this particular channel. It's a great feature. One unbelievably useful feature that really even the big mixers, most big mixers don't have that, is a sweepable high-pass filter on the input of each channel, including the stereo channels. Stereo auxiliary send is an amazing feature. You can choose between auxiliary 5 and 6, or you can choose between auxiliary 5 and 6 being a stereo auxiliary send. So one knob for the send and one for the pan for the send. If you have a true stereo effects processor, like the Tiptop Z-DSP, for example, which is completely independent left and right side, you can really utilize it in a really, really, really convincing way. It's a true stereo auxiliary set. So you won't find that on many mixers. Usually, if you want to have a true auxiliary send, you need to use like 2 level sends. You cannot use one. You have to use both at the same time. And panning becomes a bit tricky because of the How do I actually use this mixer? In my case, I kind of went through different ways of using this mixer. And each of them is kind of a testament that you can use this mixer in really different scenarios for recording. So number one would be, and that's how I record most of my, let's say, live takes, or how I would play a live gig, for example. I would just play the music, mix it, use the mixer as an arrangement tool. Basically use the mixer to its full potential, like equalizer, sends and all that, balancing, and would record just stereo out to a mobile recorder or computer or whatever. Now, because the mixer sounds really good and the equalizers are very, very nice, the headroom is there, so what comes out of the stereo out is actually easy to work with. You can process it further, master. When you do the mastering on it, it just shines. It's like it's already very good. All you need to do is make it even better with the mastering, which was not the case with cheaper mixers, where you have to basically struggle. Your mix becomes clouded, dusty, a bit muddy. Here is not the case. It's just very, very good representation of what you were doing. It does not degrade. Now, I also used to record direct outs, but for now, because I only have like, the way I use my audio interface is I have 1 and 2 are the 2 inputs into the interface that I'm using for just random stuff, like connecting, if I need to connect something fast without switching on the rest of the studio. So I have a possibility to just connect something stereo straight to 2 front inputs, being either mics or line inputs. The inputs 3 and 4 are permanently connected to a guitar and a bass. So I can grab and record a guitar or record a bass without having to connect or disconnect anything. Inputs 5 to 8 are actually connected through the subgroups on the DynaSonics. This way I can basically record 2 stereo stems into the computer and then decide. I can on the fly decide what I want to record when, I can separate, let's say, drums from the other instruments, record them this way, or I can, let's say, record effects separately, or I can, let's say, record a bass drum separately and hi-hats separately from the rest of the music. Oh, again, I already talked about this. The stereo channels are tricky to record directly, so direct outs on them are summed to mono. In the future, I would probably connect my computer to them, so I would not need to record them at all. I would just use them for summing and record out through the stereo. So there are a lot of ways people can use this mixer for summing, for mixing, for recording. So I don't see myself outgrowing this mixer, especially because there is a way to add a second mixer without compromising on the obvious problems that arise when you connect just 2 separate mixers as one. Monitoring. There is a local monitoring output with a potentiometer, which is very useful. So you can connect your mix out, stereo out to a recorder or computer, and you can connect the speakers to speaker out. So basically right now I'm recording 4 group outs into the computer. I need to monitor it off the computer. So right now my monitor is connected directly to the computer, but when I do live shows or what I love to do is actually go some random locations, rent Airbnb or whatever, bring a mixer and a very small setup and just record very, very constrained kind of setups. Just like basically push the limitation of the gear. And then it becomes extremely useful to have monitors on the knob on the mixer itself. So it has a monitoring section which actually works great. Also, the quality of this output is good. And this is what I can say about all the outputs here. The auxiliary outputs, the auxiliary bus, the group buses, the mix buses, all directals, they all sound very good. Quite often on a cheap budget mixer, the mix bus somehow okay, but when you listen to, let's say, to auxiliary buses, group buses, they just degrade the sound to such extent that it just becomes unusable. You can really trust you can connect things to the output and be in peace, keep your peace of mind that it will represent perfectly what you're sending to it. Yeah, the auxiliary sends, because it has 6 auxiliary sends, or 5 if you think about the 4, 5 and 6 as stereo, I'm using them as effect sends, directly to Eurorack, basically, to Eurorack effects. It is very easy. I don't need to think about this. I just patch, connect, use. I don't need to think, oh, I have only 2, oh, I have only 3 auxiliaries and 2 of them pre-fader. Those are all switchable pre and post fader, so very, very flexible. And in a live situation, if I use it with a band, I can still have, let's say, 2 auxiliaries for effect send and 4 auxiliaries for monitor sends, which are switchable in pairs for pre and post. Next is a mute button, and this is something I haven't experienced in small mixers at all, is clickless operation. And that is one of my favorite features on those mixers. I really applaud APB for making the mute buttons clickless. It actually means I can use the mute buttons as part of my performance and not doing the super fast fades to mimic a mute button. This is really, really great. It's definitely one of the top features for me. Great, great feature. My favorite effect units been for years already been Z-DSP from Tiptop Audio. The beauty of this effects processor is that it has CV control over 3 parameters. It has CV control over, you can use CV to switch between algorithms. You have analog feedback. But most importantly for me, it has this system where you can load different algorithms by just inserting a little card, sort of like a little cartridge with algorithms. It's been on the market since 10 years, something like that. The second version is very similar to the first, it's just a bit better hardware, better sound quality. And the quality is really great, I think. The variety of effects is nice. There are a lot of... Tiptop Audio released over the years a lot of different, really highly specialized effects, which you might not use every day, some of them, but sometimes they're just exactly what you need, like really highly specialized things. And that's what I've been using. I have 3 Z-DSP effect processors used in various ways. Those are my primary effects processors when I'm mixing, basically when I'm playing live. I even prefer to have a big Z-DSP to a smaller ones because of the, basically, I just like bigger modules, and I like to see the names of everything clearly labeled, just the knobs for everything, stereo input, CV over mix. There are a lot of advantages over the bigger effects processor. In the past, I've used rack mount, lexicons and stuff, which are great, but the hands-on control is kind of non-existent. You have to tick, menu diving, data dials, menu diving, sound great, not super user-friendly. If you're using hardware and you're doing electronic music live, or you want to basically to be more spontaneous with your music, less collages, less step like one thing after another. If you, let's say, mix, if you arrange your sounds of your music on the mixer, you must have an analog mixer, not a digital, actually an analog mixer. That makes music more dynamic. You react faster to changes. You can adjust things faster because everything is in front of you. And a mixer that sounds great in this role is essential, I think. And by the way, another cool thing, like what I talked earlier but didn't really elaborate on it, you can take two of those mixers, put them together and link them in such a way that it becomes really like seamlessly single mixers. So auxiliary, how is it done? Auxiliary buses have inputs into them. So you take auxiliary bus, let's say one out of mixer A, plug it into auxiliary bus in on the mixer B, and all auxiliary bus one becomes like one auxiliary bus. Like there is no gap between the mixers. It also applies to groups and, very important, solo. There is a solo link, you press a solo, both mixers react to that. Essentially, I can get another one and turn it into 40 channel mixer. It still will have only 6 auxiliaries, so auxiliary will not grow suddenly, but the channel count will. It's so featured. This is like a real professional live mixer. That's where it's coming from. Most studio mixers nowadays, smaller ones, don't even dream to have such features like the DynaSonics. So I love working with this mixer. It just makes everything sounds good.